Greeting everyone. You are basically joining us again, myself and Dr. Jay Smith, as we continue this series on the different problems of the Quran. Last time we talked about the traditional, basically Islamic story and sources regarding the two compilations. And even with that traditional story, we zoomed on a number of problems that had to do with the way the Quran was put together, and it doesn't require a lot of effort to see the hand of man in all of that. Today, we're going to take another look at the so-called the 6 early Quranic manuscripts. And by the way, when we say an early Quranic manuscript, we're talking about the 7th and 8th century, which is the first century Islamic century and the second Islamic century as well. Dr. J, what would you have to say now about these 6 early manuscripts and what kind of problems we deal with?
Now we're coming probably to the most damaging material that I've come across. This is material that I didn't have 35 years ago when I began, not even 25 years ago when I was moved to London to really confront the Quran. We didn't have what we have today. And the reason why is because Muslims have always made this claim that the Quran, eternal, sent down, completed at the time, first, as we saw in the last episode, first time was with Abu Bakr, and then second time with Uthman. And that Quran, the Uthmanic recension, is the final canonized text. That this book that I have in my hand right here, this one here, that this is the Uthmanic recension. This is the Uthmanic Quran.
Correct.
That's what I've always heard. And whenever I've asked them, well, can you prove it? They say, oh yeah, we've got all the manuscripts. We're the only religion that can trace back its origin to the original text, trace back the whole line of manuscripts to the original text. And more than that, we're the only one that have the complete text. We're the only one that have a completed text that has never changed in 1,400 years. Claim after claim after claim. And we talked about this already, with what Shabir Ali said, and of course the earlier, we did that in our previous episodes, so we don't need to repeat that. But there was no way that we really could rebut that. There's no way that we could come back on it because we didn't have access to these manuscripts. So I remember asking many times, tell me, where are these manuscripts? Dr. Shabir Ali, who I've debated 6 times, he refers over numerous times to the Topkapi. This is the one that is in Istanbul. He refers numerous times to the Samarkand, which is in Tashkent, and he also referred to the Ma'il. Those are the 3 he always liked to go to. Those are his favorite. Topkapi, Samarkand, and the Ma'il. But fascinating, though we had access to the Ma'il, it's in British Library, we didn't have access to the Topkapi or the Samarkand, the 2 of the most famous, probably the most prized of the 6 manuscripts.
So what would you like to start with here?
Let's go ahead and look at those 6 manuscripts. We'll put them up on the screen right now. Up in the upper left-hand top, you can see the Topkapi. Right in the middle, in the upper middle, is the Samarkand, and then on the right is the Ma'il. And then the bottom 3 at the bottom here on the left would be the Petropolitan manuscript, which is found in Paris, in the Bibliothèque Nationale. And in the middle there in the bottom would be the Husseini manuscript, which is found in Cairo in Egypt. And then on the right is the last manuscript that was discovered in 1975. That is the Sana'a manuscript from Sana'a in Yemen. Those are the 6 manuscripts. And we, again, except for the one on the far right in the upper hand corner, and the one on the far left in the bottom-hand corner, those are the only 2 we had access to in Europe. All the rest were in Muslim hands, and they would not give us access. So it was 2 Muslim scholars that had access to them. They were the first ones to give access to it. And the Muslim scholars who did get access were known as Dr. Tayyar Atukulic and Dr. Ekmenuddin Ihsanolu. And what I like to do is show their pictures. Here is a picture of Professor Dr. Ekmenuddin Ihsanolu. He's a founding director general of IRSISA from 1980 to 2004. He's a secretary general of the organization of the Islamic Conference Research Center. And he, along with this gentleman that I'm showing you right here, Dr. Tayyar Atukulic. Dr. Tayyar Atukulic is a leading scholar in the Quranic studies. He was the ex-president of the Turkish Religious Affairs, and he's deputy in the Turkish parliament. So this man is high up. In fact, he is more the scholar than Ekmenuddin Ihsanolu is. And it's Atukulic, really, who is the author of the book they both came up with that we see there on the slide called Al-Musaf al-Sharif. Now, you have this book, do you not?
That's right. And it's basically they took the images of these manuscripts and put it together in what looks like a Quran, basically.
Okay. Now, we do have the book ourselves back in London at our library there. I know Dan Brubaker has one in his library. Josh Lingel has one in his library. So a number of us have paid the $400 to get the entire book, because it was then published in 2009. The English copy was made available in 2013. I saw my first copy in 2014. 2013, and I immediately challenged Shabirali, Dr. Shabirali, to a debate on these manuscripts. And that debate was on September the 29th, 2014 in Toronto. And if anybody wants to go see that debate, you can go see it. Just get up on YouTube and just type in The Great Debate, Shabirali versus J. Smith. The classic debate, J. Smith versus Shabirali. You only need to watch the first 50 minutes.
That's right.
Because pretty much we destroyed him in the first 50 minutes. It was that simple. He did not know what was coming. He had no idea that we were going to and look at these 6 manuscripts. And we were going to show what the Muslims said first. Now, Here, you want to go through what they want to say.
Absolutely, because we want them to see that their own scholars are making remarks related to these manuscripts.
Absolutely. Now, what he said, and the first thing he said about the Topkapi, which is considered to be the best amongst them. We have none of Uthman's Musafs, Ekmeleddin Ihsanalu said.
That's important.
Okay, now why is that important?
Because he's admitting that this is not one of those copies that we keep thinking as grow up as a Muslim or Muslims think. It's one of those that were sent to the provinces.
That shoots that whole notion that Uthman's recensions still exist today.
That's right.
Which I've heard for 35 years.
Meaning no original.
There's no original text. Number one, and Muslims, please hear us when we're saying that. It's not us saying that. This is Ekmeleddin Ihsanalu and Dr. Tahir Abdulkulich saying that. Secondly, he said, nor do we have any copies from those Musafs. Not only do we not have the original, we don't even have any copies. These Musafs date from the later Umayyad period. Now, the later Umayyad period goes from about 651 to 749 or 750.
Correct.
For about 100 years.
Exactly. And then the Abbasid came.
And the Abbasids then come in after that. The Abbasids were headquartered in what is today Persia. Back then, the Umayyads were headquartered in Damascus, much further north. We're going to talk about that in another episode. Why is it doing way up in Damascus? Okay, but that's for another day. Certainly, you do have this Umayyad period. So these are Umayyad Qurans, 650 to 749. Let's see what Dr. Tahir Abdulkulich says. Dr. Abdulkulich says, no serious scholarly work has been done on them. So this is nothing more than speculation. Everything we've heard about the Quran up to this time is nothing more than hearsay.
That's right.
These Musafs date from the early to mid-8th century. They are not Uthmanic, nor copies sent by him.
So there goes that theory too.
Now, let's look at the Topkapi, and let's go through real quickly. We don't have time to go through all of them. The Topkapi, that's the Al-Musaf al-Sharif. That's a picture of the cover of the book that they came out with. There you can see some pages. That's the Fatiha, in the middle there. If you can see, a lot of it's missing. And this is what you'll find. If you look at the style of writing, you notice it's Kufic. You mentioned this before.
That's right.
It's very stylized writing. His conclusions are this, and this is what he says. He dates it to the second half of the 1st century AH and the first half of the 2nd century AH. Why? Because of the vowling and the dotting. Now, help me here. What is AH, and what does this date mean?
And that's basically, it's called the Hijra, which means that from the date Muhammad immigrated from Mecca to Medina. And that happens in 622 AD.
Okay.
And from that date forward, you start getting the 1st century Islam,
So
2nd
second
century
half
Islam.
of the 1st century would be 672.
Yeah, because you had 50 years to
And
it.
the first half of the 2nd century, well, the 2nd century begins in 722.
Yeah, right.
So the first half of the 2nd century goes up to 772.
Correct.
So basically he's saying from 672 to 772 by our reckoning.
That's right.
That's 100 years that he's getting into that. Now, he doesn't say how, except because of the vowling and the dotting.
Correct.
That's all he says. Is the reason
And
he
he's
came to that
looking at
conclusion.
the style of the vowling. By the way, there are 2 systems in here, one early and one later. So he's probably taken that into consideration.
Okay, now there's others that he quotes in his book, and I'll just read here. I have it right here. He also quotes Fehmi Edem Karatai, who says that he's rather vague in his dates, and he says this Musaf may have been copied in the 1st or 2nd century. So he's basically agreeing with Abdulkulich and Ekmeleddin Ihsanalu. He then quotes Dr. Muhyiddin Serin, much more specific, who says the date is probably to the turn of the 2nd century Hijrah. Turn of the 2nd century, that would be 722 and later.
That's correct.
So he's putting it even later. He's not putting it all in the 7th century. He's saying 722 or later. Then he says, however, folios. Now, remember, there are 408 folios, I think it is, in this text.
It is 408
folios.
That's correct.
So he's saying folios 1 to 6 and 11. So 7 of these folios were copied much later and bear the characteristics of the mid-2nd century. Mid-2nd century.
Which mean it was added later.
2nd century begins in 722. The mid-2nd century is somewhere around, well, about another 25 years after that. So 30, 40, about 745. Ooh, we're talking about the time of the Abbasids.
Either it wasn't complete or something was damaged and they tried to replace it.
Obviously, these come later, all right? Altikulich, then we've already said what he says, but then you have François de Roche. François de Roche chimes in on this and says the dates are unclear. Though it is without any doubt, that's fascinating. He just said it was unclear. Though it is without any doubt, so he's very clear now, a copy of the 2nd to 8th century, which is related to the Umayyad tradition. So he's putting it in the 2nd 8th century AH, which is the 8th century, because 722 is when the 2nd century comes into. That's well into the 8th century.
Correct.
So date-wise, we can see that this is all pretty much in the 8th century. Most of them are saying 722 or later. Now, there are some Muslims, like our friend, I don't have to name him right now, but who has chimed in, has been Muslims at Speaker's Corner. They would like to take that first date, 672. They just jump on that real quickly without second. No, that's not what any of these scholars are saying. Right. They're saying from 672 up to 772. And most of them are putting it within the mid part of that, 722 and later. So we need to emphasize that when you hear Muslims on the internet, especially these brash young fellows, when they always want the 672 date, they're not quoting the scholars. They're doing that they have an agenda. An agenda is to get it as close to Uthman as possible.
That's correct. And Jay, these are deep topics. So what if we wrap up this particular episode and then we come back again with a fresh start to talk about some of the other manuscripts?
We can do that. Let's do that. But before we do, we do need to say one more thing about the Topkapi.
Oh, absolutely.
We need to talk about the variants. The Topkapi has an enormous amount of variants, not just a few, not just 100, 2,270 variants. Altikulich says, but he doesn't say what they are, nor does he say where they are.
And doesn't provide the list.
He doesn't provide the list, which is
the claim
tragic.
Is like it's a dagger, which...
Dagar Aleph. And the Dagar Aleph is what?
It's just a short aleph, basically, that you put it above, basically, a letter to make it sound like an ah.
A long ah. And it was added at a later date, which we know the Dagar Alefs were invented much later.
That's right.
And so he's saying that that's all it is. No, he's not. He's saying quite a number of them. 2,700 inches where there is a difference from the consonantal text of the Fad. Now, when he says Fad, that would be the authorized text that came in 1924. Fad is another name for the 1924 Cairene text. So we need to say that. And here's quick differences between, here's one of those variants that you see in Surah 14, Ayah 38 by Keith Small. Dr. Keith Small shows this as an example where you have in the Topkapi, you know what we conceal and what he revealed. If you look at today's text, it's been you know what we conceal and what we reveal.
So that's a huge difference now. Who's talking in the first one versus who's talking in the second one?
That's right. What's the text content? Here's another one in Surah 3, Ayah 158. If you should die or be slain, you shall not be gathered. Today, it says, if you die or be slain, before him you shall undoubtedly be gathered. Well, that completely contradicts it.
Absolutely. It's a whole different message.
A completely different message, completely different verse. Do not say that these are insignificant, and do not say that they don't have any theological significance. They have huge theological meanings. And we can leave that at there, and of course, pick this up in the next episode.
Thank you so much for all of this wonderful research. I hope that our viewers, as I am expecting, have enjoyed listening to you, and have enjoyed even the way we are dissecting these deeper topics now, very slowly, very gently, because we wanted to, especially our Muslim friends, to take this information and research it. It's available, most of it, if not all of it, available for you to go and investigate and check our resources. And if you think we are fabricating anything, please go and double check everything that we have given you. Thank you so much, brother. Till we meet again, have a blessed day. Thanks for watching. Make sure to like and subscribe so that you don't miss future videos. And please consider becoming a patron on patreon.com/CIRA International.